Ja, meine Damen und Herren, herzlich willkommen zum NATO-Talk 2020. Schön, dass Sie alle da sind. Der NATO-Talk 2020 der Deutschen Atlantischen Gesellschaft, der Bundesakademie für Sicherheitspolitik und auch des Bundespresseamtes. Mein Name ist Julia Weigelt. Ich bin halb Journalistin, halb Moderatorin und halb Yogalehrerin. Und ich freue mich,
teacher, professor, half journalist, half yoga teacher, and it is my pleasure to moderate the event for you today. In preparing for this event, in the beginning, I felt some kind of sadness in our team of organizers. Everybody said, well, security policy, this is such a heavy topic, it's so hard to generate interest in that among people. And then the coronavirus happened, and this is now a Damocles sword over everything, and so we wanted this to be a 100% physical meeting. Then we decided to do a hybrid event to have people join in virtually. So people were sad about that. And so in our team at the same time, I also noticed that there's a fighting spirit as well. Kind of like if life hands you lemons, we'll make lemonade. And we could look at this event as a Eurovision Song Contest with joining in, having people join in from different countries. And I thought, well, that's the spirit. That's how we're going to approach this. And it is my pleasure to welcome you today, the few people who are actually here physically in Berlin, but also all of you on YouTube and on Zoom. It is my pleasure to have you here, to welcome you here. 1,000 people registered for the event. This is twice as many as last time. It is great to have you all here. And there are different groups that signed up and that united. And so we do have a Eurovision Song Contest spirit of groups that join us, the Bundesverband für Sicherheitspolitik at the German universities, the Federal Association for Security Policy. Do we see a Twitter wall here somewhere? Do we have something that we can put on the screen, a Twitter wall? Maybe our technicians can do that. Maybe you at home can see the Twitter wall if you're joining us. Ah, here we go. There's the Twitter wall. And let's take the NATO Talk 2020 hashtag and let's see what's going on Twitter. If we look at that, we have many screens that are on at the moment showing different things. So let's look at the Federal Association for Security Policy at the German universities. Maybe you can give us a heads up here on Twitter. If you want to follow us on Twitter, do that under the hashtag NatoTalk2020. And I think there will be more people telling us on Twitter that they joined in. There is the Club of International Politics of the Zeppelin University in Friedrichshafen. Welcome to all the students there from Friedrichshafen. It's good to have you. And you can also say hello on Twitter using the NATO Talk 2020 hashtag. So, ladies and gentlemen, you can join us here, and all the people at home from their computers can also ask their questions via Twitter, via YouTube, for example, and I would like to welcome all of you. We have about 50 people here in the room in Berlin, and I would once again like to welcome you as well. I would like to introduce the three gentlemen up on stage with me. They are our hosts today. There is Christian Schmidt. A pleasure to have you. Grüß Gott, I think is what I should be saying to you as somebody from southern Germany. You're the president of the Deutsche Atlantische Gesellschaft. And remember, Mr. Schmidt has been in Parliament for about 30 years. Just think about that. That's almost inconceivable. That's quite something to achieve, 30 years in Parliament. Mr. Schmidt has once been Minister for Agriculture, but it's not that bad, you know? It's okay to have been that. We all know that your heart is very much committed in beating for security policy, for transatlantic cooperation, and we're very happy to have you here. If you want to learn more about Mr. Schmidt, I would like to invite you to look at our homepage, NATO Talk 2020. We have all the CVs online, and you can read up on everybody who's present here today. And there's a lot to learn about Mr. Schmidt. Now, let's look at the first panel. The first panel will discuss the U.S. elections this year, and we will have a lot of expertise in this room. Is there one question for you that you think is the most important thing that you would like to ask the panelists? Well, thank you, Ms. Weigelt. I'm very happy that we're here together, that we can conduct this event together. Our NATO talk was supposed to be renewed and rethought anyway, and so we do that in a very intensive manner right now with your help too, and with the help of Werner Sonne and all of our other friends. Thank you for that. I came to the Gasometer in Berlin, to this venue, a few years ago when I was still Minister for Food and Agriculture. Back then, I had to discuss the chicken, the poultry that was treated with chlorine. That was a very unpleasant topic. And at the Munich Security Conference, I remember that Joe Biden talked about TTIP. He suggested TTIP, this trade agreement, in 2007 or 2009. I don't remember so well. But anyway, he brought it up. And today, the question is not, will TTIP exist at some point? But my question would be, leaving chlorine-treated poultry aside, does NATO have to do more than reaching the 2% goal? Is NATO not more than just money? Where is the new strategic approach within NATO that we need for it? And if we need a new strategic approach, what role does Asia play, especially the region that before the pandemic? Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. The next person I would like to introduce, and I would like to move over just a tad, is Ekkehard Brose on the far side. It's a pleasure to have you. You're the president of the Federal Academy for Security Policy, BAX, one of our hosts, and Mr. Brose, your CV is online too, and I would just like to say that he is a 100% diplomat. He was deployed to Washington, D.C., to NATO. He represented Germany in Iraq. And when we got to know each other, you told me that in 1999, back then, on the 50th anniversary of NATO, you joined Javier Solana, the Secretary General at the time. You were traveling with him, and you traveled to DC with him, and times were different then. Everything is different today. So how was that back then? Well, it was a very exciting event. I have to get used to the thought that I'm at a Eurovision Song Contest here right now, and I'm singing, participating on behalf of the BAX, my institution. That's the spirit. That's right. So 51 years ago, 1999, NATO celebrated its 50th anniversary. And indeed, I had the honor of accompanying Javier Solana to DC. And this celebration, just imagine it. We had about 1,000 guests. We had a seated dinner in the White House, and of course in tents in the gardens surrounding the White House. And so that was a moment where I thought, wow, I'm getting goosebumps. This is an honor. So you were moved. Yes, indeed. Clinton was not that far from me physically at the time, and so I was moved. And the power of that moment was what moved me, but also the political impact, the political power of that moment, because that was the unipolar moment where the United States still governed the world, or where you at least had that feeling. And NATO, of course, was the bridge towards the Atlantic, and from both sides we used that bridge, and the Europeans were very much on that bridge too. And so the power, the impact can be compared to what we experience today, 21 years later. It's just a few years ago, so we can actively remember 20 years ago. It's part of our lifetime. But what's the situation today? Well, it's an interregnum at international level. It's a situation where nobody's really governing, where nobody really says and where we're going, where the path is going to be. The bridge across the Atlantic is still there. It's still functioning, but it's not functioning politically. It is not being used politically. Nobody is crossing that bridge. This is, in short, our current situation, the status quo. And in that status quo, we're having our NATO talk. And this is why the importance of this event is so great. So what we're going to do today is trying to, from what I described, to break out of that and making that bridge across the Atlantic walkable again. So looking back, you described that you were so moved. So many people were at the event at the White House, just as many people as we have joined in today. But back then, that was the White House, and now we lived through 4 years of President Trump. So how was that for you? Well, for me, this was not much easier than for many other people. I spent my time in NATO, and it was a very emotionally intensive time. How did you feel at the time? Well, when I was at NATO before Trump, I had a spirit of solidarity and cohesion where people stood up for each other, and that was very moving and a very strong emotion. The anti-multilateralist then damaged that spirit, and as an anti-multilateralist, Trump wanted to do that. President Trump wanted to do that. And so now President-elect Biden is an opportunity because he is a transatlanticist. It is an opportunity for us as well. Mr. Schmidt said it. There's no point in playing the blame game. We can't put the blame on President Trump because the other fingers on that hand point back to us. We, as Europeans, have to do something now to deliver a response towards Biden as the transatlanticist. So you're feeling at ease, you're feeling like a new start. Yes, it's a feeling of a new start, but a sense of duty for us Europeans as well. So China is an important topic. We just mentioned it. It's an important topic for NATO, for us, the European identity, our ability to act as a security policy actor in the world is important. And all these are topics that we cannot provide rhetorical answers to. No, we have to let our words be followed by deeds, and that's difficult as Europeans and as Germans is challenging. And so based on that experience, if we can see the Slido screen once again, so if you were to ask another question to the next panel that analyzes the US election, what is the most important element for you? Well, I think what I said can be summarized in one sentence. The European pillar in NATO must be built, but how? So your question would be, and I would like to forward that to the back office, maybe that was very fast, but let me rephrase that. So what do we want the European pillar within NATO to look like? How can we build it? It's not quite how I phrased it, but the way you phrased it is interesting because that was an American viewpoint. The European pillar was a term that Kennedy coined. We want to use that pillar, but how can we build it? And so I want to forward this to the back office.
I don't know if you can see it, but my colleague Nicoletta Backhaus is in our back office. She is going to administer all your questions, and thank you very much for your support, Nicoletta. And then last but not least, Reinhard Müller, our host today at the Gasometer, which is part of the European Energy Forum. We are on the campus of EUREF, as it is called. There's research, there's teaching, and there's industry. 3,500 people here from different startups too. I don't know if these figures are up to date, but Mr. Müller, I was surprised to read that this event today is going to be the last event in the Gasometer because you're moving to Düsseldorf. So how does that feel to know that it's the last event right here? Well, first of all, I am pleased that this NATO talk is going to be one of the last events held here. I think you all know this event from Günther Jauch's talk show too, so this whole space is going to be turned into a new event space, and we are going to move to the EUREF campus, the new campus in Düsseldorf. We are, as I said, very pleased to have this event here because I'm convinced that energy policy and security policy, we can see that every single day, are very, very closely interlinked. So energy policy is the focus of this campus, right? So sustainability, and you're talking about sustainability and security policy. We've been demonstrating since 2014 that we are meeting the climate targets of the federal government, also the new climate, the Paris Climate Accords, that the Americans are going to try and implement now under President Biden. So we've been meeting these targets since 2014, and we've shown that we do not have to generate additional costs by being climate efficient, climate friendly. So if you look at this panel, an analysis of the US election, would you have one question to our experts here? Well, I'm sure you can imagine that I was extremely pleased about the result of the elections. And I am very optimistic too, because if it is true that Mr. Biden is going to return to the Paris Climate Accords, then my question is, how are the American people going to react? Because this is a turnaround. And that means a strain for the people, for the economy. And of course, I welcome this decision, but of course, it is going to be a challenge. And all of us, as Europeans too, really have to support this decision as best we can. But my question is, how are the people going to react? Well, maybe we have some people on the panel who know more about the general vibe in the US. So, Nicoletta, the question is, how do the American people respond to the return to the Paris Climate Accord? Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you for making this event possible. Yes, I think that does deserve an applause. If I may, thank you very much, Ms. Weigelt, and thank you very much to the entire team of BAX and the Deutsche Atlantische Gesellschaft. It is really, really great work that you are doing. And Mr. Müller, you also, you've been working on, or at this event space, we've talked about renewable energies, of the Africa strategy. This has been a center of innovation and sustainability. So thank you very much for your good work here too. Thank you. We are going to have a new conference center here with a space for 1,000 people in the audience. So maybe in 2024 we will have to be able to welcome the NATO talk here again, live with the big audience. Thank you very much.